Hey everyone, we're trying something new this time. We're going to talk about some of the things I sold online and how they did, but we're also going to talk about what other things in those categories sold and what the top dollar was, and see how that compares to the kind of things that we're finding. So I think it's going to be interesting and informative. Let's look at what sold last month for us on eBay. This went to one of our viewers, and I was very happy that she got it. It's a really cool piece. It's Glidden. They did a lot of circus animals. They did juvenile lines as well, which was something because Glidden was pretty sophisticated stuff overall. Parker Glidden and his wife graduated from the Alfred School in New York in 1940. They were taught by Schreckengost and some other really important designers. They came out with a very sophisticated line of production stoneware decades ahead of all these studio potteries that people are collecting now, decades ahead of even pottery craft. They were probably the first commercially successful modernist stoneware maker in the United States. It's because the quality was really good. The designs are interesting. There's the Glidden mark on the back. This went for $29 on a buy it now.
So now here is the Glidden animal plate that sold for the most money during the period of time that we were selling ours.
And this one went for $40. It's very cute with the giraffe. The giraffe's a little harder to find. One thing they did not do in the listing is they did not say the size of this. And it is possible that this is larger. The size I sold was a dessert plate size. This might actually be a dinner plate size. So that's a little bit of comparing apples and oranges. And that's why it's important if you're going to eBay looking up completed listings to do your pricing, make sure you take a moment and read that description and know for sure that what you're comparing is exactly similar to the one that you're going to price. This was really cool. I was not sure who the customer was for this, but it ended up selling to someone in Honolulu, which makes perfect sense because Charlie Chan was based on a fellow from Honolulu who was a Chinese-American detective. And because of that, there's a lot of interest there. This is a really big poster. It was so big, I actually had to take a picture of the picture I had of it because there was no way I could get back far enough to really show it. It's the size of the door. And it went for $145 on one bid. And I was very pleased with that because I just wasn't sure this was the later Charlie Chan. It wasn't the most famous person who did it. In fact, this was pretty late in the series. And it was the docks of New Orleans, so it wasn't even set in Hawaii. But the interest was still there from someone living in Honolulu who probably knows the original story of Chang Apana, who was the detective who Charlie Chan was based on. He was a real badass. Very interesting. He really went after the opium trade and the Chinese underground at a time when he was the only person who could successfully penetrate that. I mean, they did everything they could to try to get rid of him, but somehow he managed to keep on going. And so did Charlie Chan. Charlie Chan movies were made for about a 20-year period. So I thought it was great that this went to somebody who really appreciated it because of local interest.
Now here is the Charlie Chan movie poster that sold for the most money during the time that we sold ours.
And this is a small one. This is a lobby card. Ours was huge. And this one is about this size. This is an earlier piece with a well-known actor who did many of the Charlie Chan movies. And it also has that great cat right in the middle. And so it has a certain punch graphically in a small space. I believe this movie came out during the Second World War, so it's about 6 years older than the lobby card that we sold. And it went for $199 on one bid. The Caithness Pink Dahlia paperweight, this was such a pretty piece. It went for $59 on a buy it now, and it went to a viewer of ours who buys really nice things. I really like, if you look in this picture, the way that it has the stippling inside. That's a very interesting way of controlled bubbling. When you're making a paperweight, you make a dome and you put it into another dome. And so to get that in just that area, they had to really go through and very precisely put the bubbles in before they merge the two and fuse them together. There's a real science as well as an art to making paperweights. And I think that's why they're so popular again. People are realizing how much incredible detail goes into these rather small objects. Just look at all that. It's just wonderful.
And here is the Caithness paperweight that sold for the most money during the time that we sold ours.
This one is one of the William Manson designs. He was an artist who came in and did various sea critters. These are seals. And this one has its box and has its certificate of authenticity. This came over from England and sold for about $300 US. So Caithness is a great name to look for. And of course, if you can find boxes and COAs, well, that always is a help. Hiller Helicopters. This went for $10 on one bid. Also to a regular of ours. They waited till the end to see if it was going to still be there, and they ended up getting it for a very good price, I think. I think it's even more interesting than the price it sold for, but I am glad that it went to them. I did not pay a lot for it, so I was just wanting it to find a good home. And it is really cool. I mean, it shows all of these helicopters from the early 1950s. The shapes are just so interesting to me. Helicopters haven't looked like that for a while.
And this is the helicopter manual that sold for the most money during the period of time that ours was for sale.
That may have to do with the fact that it is a single issue for a single helicopter, and also that because it's Boeing, it has a wider current collector following because Boeing is still in business, whereas Hiller got merged into Fairchild Industries decades ago, and a lot of people are not aware of Hiller. Now, you notice this is in Great British pounds, which means it was about $31 in US dollars. So that's the one that went for the most. I have to say, all of those prices surprised me a little. I think helicopters are really interesting. When I was very little, we grew up near the largest helicopter base during the Vietnam War. So I honestly think maybe, to my mind, helicopters would have a bigger following, like automobilia, airplanes, that sort of thing. But I'm getting the impression from the pricing that maybe helicopters are a little more obscure and a little smaller group of collectors. This beautiful hat pin, I'm so glad that it got its due. I just thought it was gorgeously made with the two birds and the wonderful paint glass top. It went for $209.50 on 30 bids. Very active bidding. The person who bought it was very excited about it, and I was excited that they got it. It's just such a beautiful piece. It was interesting to me to see a hat pin go for as much as that. I had no idea when I bought it that it would be this desirable. Then we went and looked at other hat pins that sold. And wow, was that an eye-opener. Here is the hat pin that sold for the most of all. As beautiful and lovely as ours was, this one tops it because it is Lotz glass. It is Bohemian art glass. Lotz did not make very many hat pins at all. Look how beautiful that is with the veining, just the sheen to it, the color. They were absolutely competing with Tiffany. There it is with light coming through it. This is a fantastic piece. And as fantastic as the one that I sold was, this one has an entire group of customers that mine would not have, because anyone who collects Lotz and the early Bohemian glass like this would have an interest in it for that reason alone. And it was sold out of England for approximately just over 1,000 US dollars. So there's hat pins and then there's hat pins. One thing to notice on this, look at the attachment. That is the correct attachment. That's how you know they're old. They have that little ball at the end and the other two parts that look like rings. It's all one piece, but that's the way they were cast. And that's why I knew mine was original from the era and this one is original from the era. If it doesn't have that attachment, the likelihood is it was made at a later time. The Gouda, or Gouda as we say in the US, Kandil, meaning camel. This is a very cute little miniature. It's only about 4 inches tall. I just thought the colors were really good. This is the second era. The original era, from about 1898 to maybe 1910, has a lot of high gloss. This is more of a semi-gloss, and the colors and the design are more toward the Art Nouveau. So this is the second phase of production. There are a lot of collectors for both of those eras of production. Really, the designs all have a certain similarity in color scheme, and this was just such a cute piece. Such a great design. It went for $41 on 10 bids. That was more than I expected.
There was just one out-of candlestick holder that sold for more than ours during the time we had it up for sale, and here it is.
It's a little different, although you see again the color scheme and the semi-gloss glaze are definitely of the second era. But this one is made for a votive candle, and this one has heat vents and also a hanging hoop. So this is a little bit more unusual. And they actually took a 15% discount from their listed price to sell this for $55.25. I honestly think it was worth the $65 they were asking. This one has a more definite maker name on it, Mezzo. It's a very cute piece. I have never had one that was this style before. I've only had the chamber sticks. Great pattern, love the cutouts. It'd be really fun to have a candle showing up out of there. Or if you're afraid to burn a candle for heat, well, of course, there's all these battery-operated votive lights now you could put in instead. It did have one little chip, and that does affect the value. And that makes a little more sense now, because honestly, had it not had that, I would have expected that theirs would have sold for even more. But it's the one that sold for the most of the time that we sold ours. Antarctica, the world's last frontier. This made me smile when I got it because I thought of my dad who was stationed there. I had another viewer whose dad I met last year at the Springfield Antique Show, and he also was stationed in Antarctica. And, some people have been there now, and because of that, there is interest in these. This one went for $97 on 31 bids. I thought that was a pretty good final price. I only saw one or two that went even higher. We'll talk about those in a minute and why that might be. I will direct you to the logo on the right there, Task Force 43 with the shield and the anchor. That may have something to do with it. And that's part of the reason I thought it would be fun to compare some of these items to things that sold for higher prices in the same category. Here is the Antarctic plate that sold for the most. You notice it's the same as the one that I sold, but it has a very simple Task Force 43 block. I think that makes it older. I think this is the original design, and it went for $179.95. And they did a fixed price. Of course, there's always the argument, will you get more if you do a fixed price on eBay or more at auction? And the truth is, you don't really know. So you just have to pick one. I like doing the auctions because it's something we can give back to the members, give them a little bit of early access in exchange for the contributions that they give that help keep the channel going and able to do these extra things and these deep dives. But I also like to see how the market is operating, and the auctions are a good way to do that. There she is, Miss Universe. This was the first Miss USA to become Miss Universe. This was the third year of the pageant. Of course, the pageant didn't exist until 1952 because this company, Catalina Swimwear, was the sponsor, and they wanted the people in the pageant to wear their stuff in the swimsuit competition. And Miss America 1951, who had been raised in a convent school and was from Alabama, objected to it on a whole bunch of reasons and did not participate in the swimsuit competition and won anyway. And that did not go over well with the sponsor. So they started the Miss Universe pageant, and everybody wore a swimsuit, as you can see here. And I have to admit, they're very cute. So swimsuits were in the Miss Universe pageant. And here you see more. And here's the award. The crown was valued at something like $250,000 in the 1950s. It is absolutely studded with real jewels. It's pretty amazing. It is truly something that you would expect to belong to royalty. This was sent from Miss Universe Beauty Pageant to a young gentleman who was very interested in seeing this after the fact. And so it was in his collection, and it ended up in someone else's collection for $53.05 on 21 bids. That's a pretty good price for these. The ones from this era, they typically do run around $50 each.
Even though we did really well for a Miss Universe magazine of our era, it turns out that other eras actually sell for more, and here's the one that sold for the most on eBay during the time we had ours up for sale.
And this is 1975, a lot later than our program, from El Salvador. There's Catalina Swimwear. They were still the sponsors in 1975. And there's your beauty delegates, as they were called, from all over the world. Aruba, Bahamas, Virgin Islands. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of these from the 1970s actually are the ones that sell for the most money. And I don't know if that's because there's international interest that's driving it or what the reason behind it is. That would be interesting to know. Now that I'm aware of that, I'll definitely be looking for Miss Universe programs from other places and other countries. The New York Central, I have always really enjoyed New York Central stuff. They were the water level route because they went up the river and along the lakes. And so you had a nice smooth ride. You didn't have to go on the Pennsylvania Railroad, which wound through the mountains and was a lot more bumpy and jostling. This particular plate, though, is the Mercury pattern, and the Mercury trains ran from Chicago to Cincinnati and to Detroit. This is specific to those lines. It's a very good Art Deco design. New York Central was starting to streamline its trains in the 1940s. When this pattern came out, they had it made for them by Syracuse, China. And you can see it has the back stamp. Now, back stamps can be really important. Some patterns of railroad china were sold to other companies besides the railroads. And if they don't have the railroad back stamp, the collectors will not pay the railroad premium for them. So you want to make sure that you take a look for back stamps if you can find them. However, there's also a very good old reference book on railroad collectibles that's worth looking in because some of those patterns, they never put a back stamp for the railroad, but the railroad were the only ones allowed to order it. And in that case, the railroad collectors do make the distinction and they will buy that piece. So important to know which is which, and there is a good resource for that. I just think it's a great design because it's so modern for its time. And they used it for a long time. This did have some surface and edge wear, no damage, but definitely not completely glossy. Had seen a lot of travel on that train. It went for $45.92 on 10 bids. That's a pretty good price for the condition it was in and for being the dinner-sized plate.
Now, it's a different pattern from a different line of the New York Central Railroad, but this is the New York Central plate that sold for the most during the time that we had ours up for sale, and in part because it has the 1831 steam engine that started off the railroading in America.
Now, even though the Mercury plates can go as high as $65 and $75 in great shape, the number one seller on eBay this month was the New York Central DeWitt Clinton. That's a different line. And this is the 10.25-inch dinner plate, which is a hard size to find. Sizing matters with dinner plates and glass items. A subtlety of 1/4 of an inch can make one item actually a lot scarcer than another. So it does pay to measure and know what some of these measurements are. 10.25 inches was actually rather large for a train car because you don't have a lot of space there. So they usually were 9.5 inches like the one that I sold. And it's also a good pattern from the 1920s. So you can see that as well as we did on our plate, there are certain plates that sell for even more. This was the most expensive of the New York Central Railroad china to sell on eBay recently, and it went for almost $155. Ideal Cement and Stone Company. I had a viewer who took time to find some historical information that I had not found when I went to list this piece. I was curious about Ideal Cement Stone and what they were about. And it turned out they were kind of a big deal because this sold for $46 on 4 bids. So clearly there was interest from somebody in Nebraska who was aware of this company. And I thought, well, that's great, but why? Well, it turns out, and I was very grateful to Karen for helping us out with this, it turns out that it was founded by a Swedish immigrant in 1904. And shortly after that, there was a big tornado that wiped out a good chunk of Omaha. And this company helped do a lot of the rebuilding. And because of that, they became very successful, very well known in the area. And they ended up lasting until 1988. So it was a big going concern that helped build a lot of Omaha. And apparently at their peak, they had 2 operations in Omaha, one in the north end, one in the south, that made about 7,000 cinder blocks a day. At their peak, they were producing 5 million cinder block bricks a year, as well as other concrete for architectural purposes. and they had 75 employees. So this explains why some of these old paperweights and things like this do well when it seems like, oh, well, it's cool that it's this obscure old business and who would know what this is? Well, people in these cities have memories of these places. They remember this building. They remember that it was an important part of the local landscape. They remember that they did business with them. Maybe they had a relative who worked there. There are lots of reasons that people collect things that are very specific to a city that you would think outside of there, well, who cares? Well, people do care because this is their life, their livelihood, their history, and that's why these things are so fun. And again, eBay is a great place to present these because if I put this in a store or take it to shows, who's going to walk in who knows what Ideal Cement Stone Company is? But if I put it online, people who say, oh, that's significant to me because my family had involvement with them, they can find it.
We did well on our old brick-style advertising paperweight, but one went for a lot more, and this is it right here.
This has going for it the fact that it's a wagon company. And wagon companies, early automobile, carriages, anything to do with vehicles, definitely collectible. And this one was Auburn Wagon Company out of Greencastle, Pennsylvania. You see they make farm and team wagons. That's definitely a farm wagon there. This is from the 1890s. This one went for $145. So we did well on our paperweight, but subjects have a lot to do with the value of these old paperweights. And this one, well, good subject. We've sold a few pocket mirrors the past few months. We have a nice collection from about 1910. And we picked this one because, again, another thing that is very specific to one place. So we needed to try to find somebody who would appreciate it. And we ended up with 6 bids and sold it for $20. This is a very sweet old building, a business college from about 1910, and they were giving these out to probably more likely young women who would be wanting something for their purse, and then they'd look at it and say, oh, business college, maybe I should go to a select school in a select location. That select location, unfortunately, now is basically a parking lot in Indianapolis. Almost all of the old buildings in this part of town are gone. And so this is just the only memory we have left of them. There's not a lot of information about them online. They have become obscured by history, but somebody's grandparents went to this business college and were able to make a livelihood because of it. So somebody out there remembered it.
Our pocket mirrors have been doing pretty well on eBay, but one went for a whole lot more than ours, and this is it.
This is a Pepsi advertisement, and this is early. This is from 1909. And look at that wonderful gown that this woman is wearing. And you can see this is early chromolith. See all the dots? I talk a lot about the dot pattern. You can also see this has a crack through it. So even with the damage, this sold for over $500 because it's early Pepsi advertising. And that makes a huge difference in the value. So as cute and fun and of the same era as our pocket mirror was, well, our pocket mirror is appealing to somebody who likes Indianapolis history, is interested in old buildings. It's a much narrower market than the vast universe of Pepsi collectors. And so that's why this one sold for so much money on 22 bids. I just thought this was so cool. This is a hold to light, and there you can see it doing its thing. It is its own subcategory of collecting. They actually tend to date a little bit before the golden age of postcards, which starts about 1906. This is 1904. This is the St. Louis World's Fair year. And this is the Eads Bridge, which was the big bridge from East St. Louis to downtown St. Louis at the time. It is still there. It's been there since the 1870s. It was a remarkable engineering feat in its time. And because they were able to tap so far below the river into bedrock, it has survived the huge floods of St. Louis. It has survived modernization. There are lots of other bridges there, but this one is still operating. And so the Eads Bridge, well, it still looks like this at night, I suppose, although it probably doesn't have the old St. Louis and St. Paul paint from the railroad underneath anymore. There it is not lit, and you can see that it's basically a double panel. So you have cutouts where these little cells are, these little lenses, and those are what light up when you put light up to it. Just a really fun area of collecting. The fact that it had to do with World's Fair, of course, makes it interesting to people. And it went for $40 on 8 bids.
There was only one other hold-to-light postcard from the St. Louis World's Fair that outsold ours, and here it is.
This one is the Palace of Electricity. And part of the reason that the hold-to-lights were so much fun is that this was a time when a lot of people were just starting to get electricity. And here is this postcard, and you hold it up to the sun, or if you had electric light, your electric light bulb, and you can see what this building would look like at night because it had lots of electric lights. And that was very exciting to people in 1904 because lots of people did not have electricity in their home yet. And there's a list of 6 of the different hold-to-lights that were available at the time. Of course, I sold Eads Bridge, so we know there were more than that. Couples was the company that actually made them. This one is also a 6-inch by 9-inch, which is a little larger size than the one that I sold. It went for $49 on one bid, so I'm pretty pleased with what we got for ours. But ours was in better condition. And the same person who bought that actually bought this piece, which is a wonderful piece of Camark. Now, people are surprised sometimes to find out that Camark was from Arkansas. It's not a place you think of as having lots of manufacturing, but Arkansas has had at least 3 large noteworthy pottery companies, one of which, Dryden, is still in business. They operate out of Hot Springs. Camark was seeking to be a wholesaler to the Southeast when they were established, and they were established by people connected to the Zanesville, Ohio potteries, because at that time, pottery was heavy. The cost of distributing it to the Southeast was expensive, and they thought, well, if we had a pottery in the Southeast, that would take care of that. Well, by 1940, when rail and truck travel made things more accessible, Camark was suddenly wholesaling all over the United States. They had accounts with Macy's in New York. They were sold in shops in Washington State, California. I've even seen pieces up in British Columbia that have store tags that indicate that they were sourced by the store in Canada. So Camark in the 1940s, when this was made, was a big deal. And at their peak, they made this wonderful bird flower frog. And people really like collecting flower frogs. I think there's just something interesting about the holes in the base. It gives it a different look. Sometimes they want the bowls and they actually arrange with them. But oftentimes I think it's just a piece of sculpture and you can see the quality of the glaze. So this is a very fun piece. And I'm glad that it went for $50 on 8 bids to somebody who really enjoyed it. That's about the price I thought it would go for. Here is the Camark pottery flower frog that sold for the most on eBay during this period. It went for $59. It is taller than the one that I sold. It is birds again. These are the herons. And this is also from the 1940s. Just wonderful. Great design. I can absolutely see why this one sold for a little more because it's a more complicated double figure. And there's the base. So yes, flower frogs are definitely good. And it's interesting to me to see that we did pretty well on ours. And it's all just a matter of how complicated they are and how hard they are to find. This went for $19 on one bid, and this is the Goldwater's department store scarf. It had one little tiny run in it. I probably wouldn't have bought it if I had noticed that it had that little run, but it wasn't something that was really consequential in terms of affecting the image or unraveling or doing something bad to it. So we just disclosed it in the listing, and someone was happy to get Camelback Mountain. I really like the way these are done, the way they're dyed. It's like watercolor. Look at the depth in that. And you can tell by the colors that this is a very 1970s piece because of all of the browns. There's the Goldwater's department store logo from that era. This is when they had left family control. They were in business until the late 1980s. And of course, that is the Goldwater of Barry Goldwater fame. He ran one of their stores. He was never the head of the company, though. He ran one of their stores, and then he ran for the Senate, and then he ran for president. The Senate worked out, and the presidency, not so much.
Ours was the only Goldwater scarf to sell on eBay during the period that we had it for sale. So ours sold for the most.
This went for $20 on one bid. I had no idea really whether it would sell for more than that or not. I just thought this because it was such an interesting character when I found out about him. I'd never seen one of these before, and so when I bought it in Canada, I thought, even just to tell the story, this is worth buying, and so I picked it up, and now it lives with somebody else. He's upset because he's got yet another plum and apple jam. It really is reflective of the way things were in the trenches in the First World War, from what I understand. There were long periods of boredom, and then there would be short periods of horrible, horrible hand-to-hand combat. You're diving into a trench. You're trying to stay out from under tanks. There's airplanes for the first time. Lots of crazy things going on. And you see that in the rim of this because they show the barbed wire and they show the stuff going into the trenches and they show explosions and they show airplanes and bombs and bullets being shot. Such a horrible thing war is. I hope that we really understand when we say, oh, those people are terrible and we're going to go do something about them. This is what happens to people. And it's a pretty horrible thing. So I thought this captured it very well, the war that was to end all wars. Unfortunately, it didn't, but it did make a neat story. And Old Bill went for $19.99 on one bid.
The Old Bill plates are usually found in England, and there were no other ones available on eBay during the time that we sold ours. Had we been willing to ship to England, we might have gotten a higher price. But we've had some trouble shipping to England in the past, unfortunately.
L'Envie Arpège, little bottle in the original box from about 1960, 65, somewhere in there. I got this from its original owner. It still smells good. And it sold for $56 on 9 bids. And the bidding came pretty late. I really wasn't sure this was going to sell at all. And then all of a sudden, there was a lot of interest all at once. So you just never know. That's why I do 10-day auctions. I figure it gives people lots of time to look. We put it out to our members first. They get a few days of a jump on it. Some things sell by it now to them. And then whatever is left, we carry through the whole 10-day auction. And this ended up finding a nice home. And I hope they wear it in good health. There's the end of the box. It was in pretty good shape. It's a 15 gram. I just really like the look. I like perfume bottles. They're little pieces of art in and of themselves. This, of course, is a commercial perfume bottle as opposed to a studio glass one or something by Lalique or somebody like that. But I just love that it has the old glass top with the intaglio of the design.
Our bottle of Lanvin for its size sold for as much as any of them on eBay. Now, I wanted to discuss the shipping on that because I had someone send a comment saying, isn't it illegal to send perfume in the mail? It is true that perfume is restricted in how it can be sent. But if you read the rules and you follow the rules and you declare that you're shipping perfume, you can ship perfume. There are various types, and it has something to do with the point at which they become flammable. If they become flammable at a lower temperature, you have to do more things, and at a certain point, you're not allowed to send it. But most perfume is flammable at a little higher point, and as long as it's sealed inside a non-leaking device inside of a larger box, then you can ship it. So just read the rules. And you can happily ship perfume all over the place.
Now, these went a little higher than I expected. These are Teacher's Highland Cream Whiskey playing cards. Playing cards are pretty good collectibles, especially when you get back into earlier themes, certain kinds of advertising, but especially pre-Prohibition. Anything to do with alcohol before Prohibition is definitely something of interest. We note this is before Prohibition in both the US and Canada because Teachers was sent from England. Here we see on the box that there is a Canada war tax stamp with King George V. And so we know that is from World War I. At the end of World War I, Canada actually went into Prohibition as well for a 2-year period. And then it became a provincial matter. Most provinces lifted Prohibition right away. A few, like Ontario, kept it going into the 1920s, which was ironic because at the same time, Seagram's in Montreal was making huge profits sending bootleg liquor to the United States. The Teacher's Highland Cream Whiskey was not sold in the United States before Prohibition, so finding this set of cards here in the U.S. was a surprise. It came from a big collection that I got in Portland, Oregon, and it had the Joker, and of course that's very important because missing Jokers are a big problem with older card decks because a lot of people for a period of time would collect just the Joker. So we see collections of Jokers and nothing to go with them, or decks of cards that are missing the Joker. So this one was complete, and that is why it went for $36 on 13 bids. So there was a lot of interest in this. Again, anything that is pre-prohibition in terms of alcohol has a pretty good collector following. That is a really good feeling to me. The Lalique box. This is the Dahlia pattern. René Lalique came out with this when he was still alive, sometime around 1931. In later years, they did the stippling with the black. The line had several different pieces, a couple of different perfume bottles, but it was all boudoir related, all dresser top related items. And this was in such wonderful condition. And I found it at a very fancy high-end estate sale at a price that it should not have been priced. And so because of that, I was able to start it out at $9.99, something that people sometimes think I'm crazy to do. But again, on eBay, if you have something, if you don't have a lot into it and you know it's a good piece and you know it's going to bid up, why not start it at a low price and let lots of people get involved and get excited? It went for $90 on 14 bids. That was a pretty reasonable price. They typically sell for over $100, but I am not disappointed in this at all because it is a newer version of this piece. It is a wonderful piece, and I did well, and the collector who got it, who was in the Midwest and did not have access to something like this, was very pleased with it too.
One Lalique box did outsell ours, and it was pretty similar to ours, but I think maybe a little bit older, and it went for $125.
This is from the 1915 San Francisco World's Fair. It was from the Danish pavilion made by Royal Copenhagen. These, even though they're the same size and look like the Christmas plates, and we think, well, the Christmas plates, they're not big sellers these days, but these pieces do pretty well. Anything that's commemorative other than Christmas Eve seems to be a good seller. And this one went to San Francisco to a woman with a Danish surname. And I thought, how perfect. I'd love to know the story behind that. Were her family people who came to work at the Danish pavilion and then loved San Francisco and stayed there? Or does she just happen to be of Danish extraction and she purchased the piece because it has something to do with her city? I'm not sure what the motivation was, but it definitely seemed like there was some connection there. And I love when things go to the place that they're really meant to go. And that's part of the reason I put a lot of things out on eBay, because it reaches an international market. It is the go-to place for a lot of people. I hear resellers complain about eBay. There are certainly things about it that are not perfect. There are things that I wish they did differently. But by and large, you're just not going to beat them for getting an unusual item out to the maximum number of people. This went for $29 on 5 bids. None went higher because none were available. So there isn't a higher comp on eBay for something similar to this at the time. These have sold for as much as $50 before. I got it for a very reasonable price at a thrift store that was having an annual sale, and the collector got it for a pretty reasonable price considering what they can go for. So everybody was happy. I just really enjoy antiques and vintage so much, and when we can put things in the hands of the people who really are meant to have them.
Bing and Gondrel made so few World's Fair plates and other commemoratives other than the Christmas Eve that we did not see any comps that were higher, although we have seen our plate sell for more in the past. Of all the pieces we put on, only one did not sell, and it was this piece, the Standard Wear by Leach. I think it's such a beautiful piece, so well balanced. I have a big collection of this. I honestly think that had I started it at a lower price, it would have gotten attention. This is a consignment, and the woman bought it from Leach herself in the 1950s, so she has an idea that they're of value, and they are, and I was reluctant to put it out at $9.99 like I often do on things that I purchase myself, because if it didn't sell for a decent price, it's hard to go to the client and say, oh, well, we put it out for $10 and it sold for $10, when we know that this piece is probably worth $100 to $150. So there are other ways to sell. I will probably try some of this in Lander Street Vintage in Seattle, where the modernists go who know the designers, and see if we can sell some of it there. And I will probably put other Leach pottery pieces on eBay in the future. And for those of you who might be out looking for this stuff in the wild, there is your mark. the stylized L over England. And look at the way the bottom is finished. So those are clues for you.
There is some information we can all use. What things are selling for and what other things in those categories are selling for to show you the real upside potential. It all depends on what you have. It all depends on timing. There's lots of things that go into it, but it's fun to see that there is an active collector market going on all the time, year-round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can find it online. All of us have access to it. I had someone recently say, "Oh, thrifting for profit, it doesn't work. You guys just make it seem like it's a big deal, but you can't possibly be paying your bills this way." Well, you know what? I've paid my bills this way for 25 years. And it is because we have so many avenues now that we didn't used to. We have this huge international market. Yeah, you've got to find unusual, interesting things that they're going to want. But if you can do it, you can do something in this business and have a lot of fun. And as a collector, it's so wonderful because you have all of us working for you and bringing you the best and most unusual things that we can find. And you don't have to be in the right place at the right time. You just have to be on the computer at the right time. So I hope you enjoyed this comparison of what we sold with other things in their categories. I hope you enjoyed seeing what some other people are selling and that it gave you an idea of what collectors are willing to pay for good merchandise that matches their collecting interests. Because ultimately, it is all about the collector having fun and finding the things that make their heart flutter.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.